Hello everyone, thank you. My name's not Caitlin. Oh, it's the right presentation. Caitlin's our very capable PhD student on this project, but she couldn't make it today, so I'm subbing for her. That's her there. A little bit of her background and in the soils world. Worked at Perennia for a while until we had seconded her or stole her from Perennia to work on this project, and did some work at the Otter Ponds Demonstration Forest and the helicopter liming project there, as well as some summer student worked with me at DNR when I was still there. As mentioned, this is going to be a bit of an update on where we are with this project. She would have introduced it to you last year. ForestSHARE stands for Forest Soil Health Assessment Research and Extension, and these are the partners on the project. I wanted to clarify also that even though I work with the Family Forest Network and I'm one of Caitlin's supervisors, this is not an FFN project. It's separate from FFN. It's its own entity called ForestSHARE. It's funded through Research Nova Scotia. But we have Dalhousie involved and the department, as well as Genome Atlantic on the innovation side, especially around the microbiome assessment of the forest floor. So what are the goals of the project? If you were here last year, you may have seen this. Excuse me if I have to look away every now and then because this wasn't my presentation. Essentially, we're trying to generate or develop a whole suite of indicators, soil health indicators for Nova Scotia for forest soils. But to do that, we first have to collect background information, background data. So when I was with the department several years ago, we started that process on Crown land, collecting forest soil samples, having them analyzed, and getting that benchmark data set. This project is intended to really accelerate that process, but also focus on woodlot soils. So once we have all the data collected and analyzed, the idea then is, like I say, to develop this suite of indicators that we can use to easily tell the status, hopefully, of the health of that forest soil. And then once that is done, relate that to management interpretations or management options you should follow on your woodlot to improve the health of your soils. And ultimately, what we'd like to do is have some kind of extension program similar to agriculture, where a woodlot owner could, if they choose to, sample some soils from 1 or 2 stands or whatever, however many in their woodlot, send it in for analysis, get the results and some management recommendations. So how are we doing this? As I mentioned, we're collecting samples from woodlots across the province. The idea is to collect several hundred of those, actually from about 1,300 samples from 650 sites. So a forest floor sample and a mineral soil sample. And then a comprehensive literature review. This is part of Caitlin's PhD project. What's been done in other jurisdictions for similar types of forests as we have here. What's already been recognized as a good indicator, and then we can localize that under our conditions based on the data we've collected and see what makes sense here, which indicators or which parameters to target as being useful for our situation. And then this year we've also added this new forest fire site assessment that I'll get into a little bit later. So this is the million-dollar question: what is forest soil health, or soil health in general? It's a bit of an ambiguous term, and there's different interpretations of it, but you can kind of put it into a general description as being, it's basically allowing, what is the capacity of your soil? Can it support biological function? Can it support normal productivity, that type of thing? So you're trying to, it's a bit of a holistic description and assessment But you can see based on this graphic here that it encompasses several different parameters: chemical, physical, and biological. And basically, you're trying to make sure that there's the right balance of all these things, and that that soil can do what it's supposed to do, if you want to put it that way. So the thing about forest soils that make it different than agricultural soils is that we're not trying to make all forest soils the same. Agricultural soils, it's tending in that direction. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not suggesting it all goes that way. Different crops have different needs. But in an agricultural setting, there's a lot of work done to make that soil kind of more homogeneous and uniform and able to do or grow several different crops. And so the impetus is towards homogenizing that soil, making it kind of all coming towards a target condition. But in forest soils, we don't want to do that. We recognize there are different ecosystems out there, a whole range of conditions of these ecosystems, from poor, dry pine sites to moist, rich hardwood sites. So we're not trying to make them all one. So each of those unique ecosystems has its own soil characteristics, you might say, and range of natural variation. And so we're trying to manage with those ideas in mind. So we're not trying to make a pine site into a maple site, but we want to be able to know what is a good pine site and where is this site in relation to your optimal pine site, and the same idea with hardwood. So there's going to be lots of different potential parameters that might inform that, and some of those have already been identified in the literature. Some of those we may come up with ourselves, but also it's also the range of values within Nova Scotia. What is the typical range of organic matter on a pine site, for instance, versus a hardwood site? And where might your woodlot soil be in that range that's across the province? And what's the threshold value that you want to make sure it doesn't go below? That's the type of information we're trying to generate and be able to help manage towards. So as I mentioned, our goal at this point is to collect about 1,300 samples from 650 woodlots. Each sample would be from one stand in each woodlot. This is not a total woodlot assessment. This is a preliminary data gathering exercise as part of this larger project. So we're not sampling several stands within one woodlot unless they happen to meet our random selection criteria. What we're trying to do is get representation across the province. So sites are randomly selected, and this is an important point. We've had several interested landowners come up to us and say, please do our woodlot. And we would love to do that, but we can't at this point, because in order to please the statistics gods out there, we have to make sure that it's a random selection across the province and that there's geographic dispersion. So we have this, went through this process to randomly select these sites, and hopefully most of the predicted conditions that we think are there, and when we get there, and then we'll sample those. Ultimately down the road, hopefully any woodlot owner will be able to submit samples. So if you get a letter from us asking us, for us asking your permission to let us sample a soil in your woodlot, I hope you agree to do that. And if you do, then this is a long-term project over a few years. So once we have agreement from you that we can sample, we may not get to your woodlot immediately. Odds are we won't. But you will be followed up with contact before it actually happens, to arrange access and that type of thing. And eventually, when the results are available, you will get a copy of the results if you so choose. We would also be asking if it's known any history of the stand that we sample. But it's not critical that you know that information, but if you happen to, it might help with our interpretation of the results. So this gives you an idea of the distribution. This is not to scale these dots, but it gives you an idea of the distribution of the private land areas that we're going to sample or want to sample. The different colors represent different types of ecosites, and you can see that they're dispersed around. There are some regional variation in the type of ecosystems you'll find, and that may be reflected in some of the distribution you see there. But ideally, we're getting that province-wide coverage. And some of the holes that you see are because there aren't any private woodlots in those areas, like in Guysborough and Shelburne area, for instance. So what happens during the sampling process? And this is interesting. Jamie's talked about not owning what's below ground. We had several responses last year to our letter campaign, worried that we were actually some front for the mining companies, and that we were going out there to sample soils, you know, under cover of darkness almost. We have absolutely no connection with mineral exploration or mining whatsoever. We're only going down about this far into the rooting zone of the soil, and it's totally earmarked and geared towards forest soil health. So what happens when the person gets to your site, if you've agreed, is they confirm that the condition on the ground is what we had predicted. And if it isn't at that exact spot where we thought it was, they have the leeway to move around a little bit to find the condition that we're looking for. And then they would sample either the forest floor and mineral soil, or if there isn't any forest floor of note, then they would take 2 mineral samples. We have freezers distributed at DNR and NSCC campus locations across the province. So the samples, after they're collected, would go to these freezers and be frozen for storage until they get analyzed. And then they'll get delivered to the lab and processed in the fall and winter. So these are a couple of images from some of the sampling last year. You can see the depth of the soil that was collected. We're targeting mainly the forest floor. On the image on the left there, that would be on the left-hand side, the dark material. And that orangey BF horizon, for those who are into soils, that would be our second horizon sample from there. So these are the types of things that are being analyzed for: pH and exchangeable acidity, various nutrient contents, organic matter content, percentage and different fractions of organic matter, carbon total, and the different mineralizable measures as well, how freely available that carbon is. Cation exchange capacity, that's a relative measure of the capacity of that soil to hold onto nutrients. Base saturation, that's related also to the percentage of good cations versus bad cations. Texture, sandstone clay, bulk density, aggregate stability, how stable are those beds in your soil to rain or erosion. And forest floor microbiome information. And this is where the John Rohde from Dalhousie, Halifax is involved. He does DNA sequencing of the bacteria and fungus that are in the samples, with the idea that we're hopefully going to find some kind of DNA fingerprint for different types of soils, and also variation from those that might be a health indicator. So we had limited samples done last year. We had a little bit of a slow start to get going, and then we got a little bit handcuffed by the ban, and so we didn't get as many sites done last year as we had hoped. But those samples are being processed now, and that's actually, they have been processed and they're being analyzed. Part of the assessment, or part of the project too, is coming up with analysis techniques at Dalhousie Lab that'll make it more cost effective to do this analysis in the future. So there's a significant lab component to the project too that I'm not really getting into here, but to let you know that that's part of the process. We have about 150 sites in the queue now. We're going to start sampling in May We run from May to October as a sampling season. And hopefully each day we get one or two more as it comes building, and we can get that up over 200 towards 300 ideally this year if we can. So if you are contacted by letter, we're not junk mail, we're not trying to sell you anything. All this is free. It's a research project, all the costs are covered. There's no cost to the landowner for this at this point in time on this project. And there's an email address to respond if you're willing to participate. And now that you know more about the project, if you have a colleague or a neighbor who gets one of these letters and they don't know what the hell they're looking at, you can give them an idea that this is legit. And as I mentioned, unfortunately at this point anyway, we can't take unsolicited properties for assessment because we have to meet that statistical rigor of the experimental design. So I'd like to talk briefly about this forest fire site initiative that we're doing this year. This wasn't part of the original project, but we've did a bit of a pivot here to take advantage of a bad situation in the sense that these were fairly severe fires at Long Lake and Upper Tantallon. And so we want to see what kind of impact these fires have on the forest soils, in particular the granite soils that are found in these areas that tend to be on the sensitive side. And we want to see what kind of impact these fires have had. So we're going to do a dedicated sampling program there starting next month, and do the same types of analysis that we're doing on the woodlot soils, but also looking at some things that maybe are unique to fire impacts, including what's called hydrophobicity. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a forest soil after it's been burned, but sometimes the organic compounds that are released from the fire burning the forest floor, those compounds move down through the soil and coat the soil particles and essentially turn them into where they start to repel water. So you can put water on the surface and it just beads there, it doesn't infiltrate. And so obviously that has a problem for not only plant health but also erosion hazard. So there's a way of assessing that hydrophobicity from these fires as well. So that's the type of extra stuff we'll be doing on those sites. So what's this all for? Project outcomes. Ultimately, when the project's over, we should have a comprehensive forest soil database that include ours plus what the DNR had already produced. Soil health indicators identified based on information we've collected as well as literature review. We're hopefully also going to produce what we're calling a State of the Forest Soil Health Report based on all the information that's been collected and data that's been collected. And that'll be for public use and viewing. It's not an internal report. Ultimately, as I mentioned, the idea is that this information needs to be useful. So the idea would be that with this information and knowing the status of your forest soil health, there could be management implications or recommendations that you can do that would make that or increase or at least maintain the health of that soil going forward on your woodlot. And so those would be developed. And ultimately, like I said, the idea is to have this extension program in place. Our project can't develop the extension program. We're trying to establish the foundation for it, and we would be talking with government departments about this after we have something to show them to see if there's any interest in taking that forward. And having woodlot owner support would help with that as well. So these are some of the things that you could do with this information, kind of big picture. It's all part of what we're calling ecological forest management, where ecosystem health is the main focus, while at the same time being able to generate revenue from some resource extraction. Enhanced biodiversity. Soil biodiversity is a great unknown at this point, and that's partly why we're involving the DNA sequencing of the microbiome to get a better handle on some of that mystery that's out there. It can inform species selection, silviculture, and harvest regimes. Reduce potential for soil damage. Climate adaptation is a big part of it as well. You have a healthy soil, you can have a healthy ecosystem, and then you can be more resilient to climate change. And then there's always the carbon storage side of things. Most carbon programs now don't even look at soil carbon, or if they do, it's kind of a token gesture towards it, mainly because it's too complicated, or that's the thinking. But the more that we can generate some information about soil carbon, the more likely that it can start to become part of the equation as well. So this is what I mentioned about the extension program. So I'm hoping that even if your woodlot isn't selected as part of this random initial phase, that I've generated some interest in the room, and so you can follow along our progress by visiting our website. We have an email address there too if you have any questions or whatnot. And Caitlin tells me that we have a Instagram account now too that she'll start to populate with material and videos and various things that go on Instagram. And I'm like perhaps half the room here, I don't even really know what Instagram is, but I'm told it's useful. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.